The afternoon was loud in the casual way public places usually are. Shoes tapped against the floor, cups clinked, and voices mixed together in a steady hum. In the middle of it all sat a piano. It was old but clean, placed there to invite attention. A small sign beside it encouraged anyone to play. Most people passed it without a second look. Some slowed down, curious, but few dared to sit. She was not there for the piano. She had stopped only to rest her feet and wait. Her clothes were simple, chosen for comfort, not for standing out. She blended easily into the background, like someone used to not being noticed. She watched the crowd quietly, holding her bag close, counting minutes in her head. A few people nearby noticed her standing close to the piano. First, it was just a glance. Then a whisper. Someone nudged another person and smiled. The idea formed quickly, the way careless ideas often do. They spoke a little louder on purpose, pretending to be friendly. "Why don't you play something?" one of them said, laughing lightly. It sounded harmless, but there was a sharp edge under the words. She shook her head right away. "No, thank you," she said softly. Her voice barely rose above the noise around them. That should have been the end of it. But instead, the group pushed again. Another voice joined in, louder this time. "Come on, it's just for fun. Anyone can play a little, right?" People nearby began to look over. Some smiled. Others watched with open curiosity. The attention made her uncomfortable. She shifted her weight, wishing she had chosen another place to wait. "I really don't play," she said again. That part was not fully true, but it was the truth she lived with now. Someone laughed. "It's fine. Even if it sounds bad, we'll clap anyway." The words were meant as a joke, but they landed heavily. A few people snickered, not loudly, but enough for her to hear. She felt her face grow warm. Her first instinct was to walk away, but the attention followed her like a spotlight. If she left now, it would feel like running. She looked at the piano. The keys were slightly worn, their white faded from years of use. For a moment, she remembered another piano, in another place long ago. That memory came and went quickly, like a door opening and closing in her mind. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said more firmly this time. But the group had already decided this was amusing. One of them pulled out a phone, pretending to record the moment casually. "Just one song. Please," they said, stretching the word, making it sound playful. The crowd around them had grown. Some were curious. Some were bored. A few sensed the tension but stayed anyway, waiting to see what would happen. This was how moments turned into stories without asking permission. She felt trapped between choices she didn't want. Saying no again would only make the teasing worse. Saying yes felt even harder. Her hands tightened around the strap of her bag. "I haven't played in years," she said quietly, more to herself than to them. "That makes it even better," someone replied, grinning. "It'll be funny." That word stayed with her. Funny. She took a slow breath. The noise around her faded just a little. She was tired of explaining herself. Tired of shrinking. Tired of being pushed into corners by people who did not care how she felt. If this was going to end, she wanted it to end on her terms. Without another word, she stepped toward the piano. The group went silent for a second, surprised that she had agreed. Someone whispered, "She's really doing it." She pulled the bench back and sat down carefully. Felt strange, almost unreal. Her posture was stiff, her shoulders tight. She placed her bag at her feet, as if it might disappear if she didn't keep it close. A few people leaned in. Others lost interest already, turning back to their conversations. To them, this was just a small joke that had gone far enough. She stared at the keys. They seemed brighter up close. Her fingers hovered above them but did not touch. A quiet fear settled in her chest. What if she really couldn't do this anymore? What if all that was left were broken pieces of something she used to be? Someone cleared their throat behind her. Another person laughed softly, impatient. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not to perform, not to impress, but to remember how to breathe. Her hands trembled. She pressed them against her legs to steady them. The piano had once been part of her daily life. It had filled rooms and shaped her days. But that life felt far away now, separated by years of choices she did not fully make on her own. Responsibilities, loss, and silence had slowly pushed music out of her routine until it became something she carried only inside. She opened her eyes. Her fingers touched the keys at last. The first note was soft, almost unsure. It echoed lightly through the space and disappeared into the noise of the crowd. No one reacted. She played another note, then another. Simple sounds, careful and slow. To anyone listening, it sounded like someone guessing their way through a tune. A few people smiled in a way that suggested they had been right all along. But she stayed. Her breathing settled. Her hands remembered more than she expected. Not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. The notes connected, forming something small and clear. It wasn't loud enough to demand attention yet, but it was real. She focused only on the keys. The voices around her blurred into the background. The fear loosened its grip, just a little. This was not about them anymore. It was about finding her footing again, one sound at a time. Behind her, the crowd shifted. Someone who had been walking away slowed down. Another person turned back. The teasing energy began to fade, replaced by quiet curiosity. She did not notice. Her world had narrowed to the piano in front of her. The bench, the keys, the steady rise and fall of her hands. The prank had brought her here, but something deeper was holding her in place now. And as the final note of that first simple phrase lingered in the air, it became clear that this moment was not going to end the way anyone expected. The notes continued, gentle and careful, as if she were testing thin ice. Each sound landed softly, then faded. At first, it seemed like nothing special, just someone slowly finding a tune. A few people still smiled in that same amused way, convinced they were watching an awkward moment stretch on. But something was changing. Her shoulders, once tight, began to relax. The shaking in her hands lessened. She adjusted her seat without thinking, moving closer to the keys the way she used to long ago. Her fingers no longer hovered in fear. They began to move with purpose, even if that purpose was still quiet. The music grew steadier. The pauses between notes shortened. A simple pattern formed, repeating and then gently changing. It was not flashy, not loud, but it carried feeling. It sounded like patience. A person near the edge of the crowd stopped scrolling on their phone and looked up. Another leaned against a pillar and crossed their arms, listening. The background noise of the space slowly shifted. Conversations softened. Footsteps slowed. She didn't notice any of it. Her focus was inward now. With each note, a memory surfaced. Early mornings practicing before the day began. Late nights when the world felt heavy and the piano was the only place she could breathe. She remembered the discipline, the mistakes, the endless repetition that once felt pointless but now lived quietly in her hands. For years, she had told herself that part of her life was over. There had been good reasons, responsibilities that could not be ignored, people who needed her, moments where choosing music felt selfish, even impossible. Slowly, she had learned to lock that door and keep moving forward. Sitting there now, she realized the door had never fully closed. The melody grew slightly stronger. Her left hand joined more confidently, giving weight to the sound. The piano responded in a way that surprised her. It wasn't perfect. Some keys felt heavier than others. A few notes rang sharper than she expected. But she adjusted without stopping. A man standing nearby whispered, "She's actually good," though he didn't seem to realize he'd said it out loud. Someone else shook their head, confused. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. The person who had first suggested she play shifted uncomfortably. The smile on their face faded, replaced by something closer to embarrassment. They lowered their phones slightly, no longer sure what they were recording. She kept playing. The music now carried a quiet confidence. It wasn't rushed. It didn't ask for approval. It simply existed, filling the space between people. A few more listeners drifted closer, drawn by curiosity rather than laughter. Her breathing matched the rhythm. In and out. Steady. Familiar. The fear that had once pressed against her chest eased, replaced by something warmer. Not pride. Not excitement, just a calm sense of rightness. This was not a performance to her. It was a conversation with something she thought she had lost. A child tugged at an adult's sleeve and pointed at the piano. "Listen," they said. The adult nodded, surprised by how quiet everything had become. She began to add more layers to the piece. The melody dipped and rose, telling a story without words. It spoke of waiting, of holding on, of learning to stay quiet when the world demanded noise. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman pressed her hand to her mouth, caught off guard by the emotion she felt. She didn't know why the music touched her. It just did. The space around the piano had changed completely. What had started as a joke was now something people treated carefully. No one laughed. No one spoke above a whisper. Even those who didn't understand music could feel that this mattered. She still did not look up. Her eyes stayed on the keys, following each movement as if they were guiding her forward. Her hands moved more freely now, remembering patterns stored deep in muscle and memory. The piano no longer felt foreign. It felt like an old friend that had been patient, waiting for her return. She missed a note. For a brief second, her heart jumped. Years ago, mistakes like that would have stopped her cold. Today, she let it pass. She corrected herself and continued, smoother than before. The crowd didn't react. If anything, the imperfection made the moment more real. The person who had laughed earlier shifted their weight and looked down at the floor. The prank had slipped out of their control. This was no longer something to joke about. Someone near the back quietly wiped their eyes, embarrassed by the tears but unable to stop them. The music had reached places words never could. She felt it too. A tightness she had carried for years loosened with every measure. The music did not erase the past, but it made room for it. It reminded her that even after silence, sound could return. As the piece moved forward, it grew fuller. The notes blended into a flowing rhythm that filled the space completely. The piano, once ignored, now felt like the center of everything. More people gathered. Some stood on tiptoe to see. Others recorded quietly, no longer chasing humor but hoping to capture something rare. The woman at the piano remained unaware of the audience's size. To her, it was just the instrument and the moment. She had stopped thinking about how she looked, how she sounded, or why she had agreed to this at all. She was simply playing. The prank was gone now, dissolved by sincerity. In its place stood a growing sense of respect. Even those who had doubted her from the start felt it. As the final notes of this section rang out, they lingered longer than expected, hanging in the air like a held breath. No one moved. No one spoke. And in that quiet pause, before she even realized what she had done, the crowd understood something important. This was not an accident. This was not luck. This was someone who had carried music inside her all along, waiting for the moment it would finally be heard. She moved into the next part of the music without pause. It felt natural, like stepping from one room into another she already knew well. The rhythm deepened. The sound grew warmer, fuller, carrying more weight than before. It was no longer just careful playing. It was confident. People in the crowd shifted closer without realizing it. The space around the piano tightened, forming a quiet circle. Even those who had arrived late sensed they had missed something important and stayed still, not wanting to break the moment. Her hands traveled across the keys with ease now. Each movement looked calm, almost effortless, but behind it lived years of discipline and struggle. The piano responded to her touch, echoing emotions she had kept buried for a long time. She felt a strange mix of calm and intensity. The nerves were gone. In their place was focus. Not the sharp kind that demands perfection, but the gentle kind that allows mistakes to exist without fear. The music began to tell a clearer story. It rose and fell like breath. Some parts felt hopeful, others heavy. It spoke of quiet mornings and long nights, of waiting and endurance. No words were needed. Anyone listening could feel it in their own way. A man near the front lowered his phone, forgetting to record. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on her hands. He had expected a short laugh, something to pass the time. Instead, he felt something tightening in his chest. The person who had first pushed her toward the piano now stood silent, arms crossed, eyes down. What started as a joke had turned into something uncomfortable in a different way. Not embarrassing, but humbling. She remained unaware of all of it. Her attention stayed on the sound, on the way the keys felt beneath her fingers, on the small adjustments she made without thinking. She remembered teachers who once corrected her posture, her timing, her tone. Those lessons had never really left her. There had been a time when she dreamed of stages and bright lights. That dream faded slowly, replaced by practical choices and quiet sacrifices. She had told herself it was fine, that life was simply moving in a different direction. But sitting here now, she realized something important. Music had not been a dream. It had been a language, one she had learned deeply, even if she had stopped speaking it out loud. The piano piece shifted again. The tempo changed, becoming more fluid. Her left hand carried a steady rhythm, while her right hand danced above it, adding light and color. The balance between them felt natural, like walking after a long rest. A soft sound escaped someone in the crowd, halfway between a sigh and a breath. Another person nodded slowly, as if the music were answering a question they had not asked out loud. The space felt different now, not like a public place filled with strangers, but like a shared room where everyone was quietly connected. No one checked the time. No one spoke. She leaned slightly closer to the piano, fully immersed. Her face remained calm, but her eyes reflected concentration and something deeper. The music carried pieces of her past, but it was not stuck there. It moved forward, steady and alive. A memory surfaced of the moment she had stopped playing regularly. It wasn't dramatic. There had been no final performance, no goodbye, just a slow fading as other responsibilities took priority. The piano became something she walked past rather than sat down to. She had believed that was the end of it. Now she understood it had only been a pause. The sound grew stronger, not louder but richer. She pressed the keys with confidence, allowing the piano to resonate fully. The notes filled the air and seemed to hang there, refusing to disappear quickly. Several people in the crowd exchanged glances. They didn't know her story, but they knew they were witnessing something real, something rare. A woman near the back clasped her hands together, eyes closed. The music reminded her of someone she loved, someone she had lost. She did not know why, but it felt important. The performer felt the emotion too, though she could not name it. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was release. A letting go of something she had been carrying quietly for too long. She reached a section of the piece that demanded more control. Her fingers moved faster, more precisely. The sound became intricate but never harsh. Each note landed exactly where it needed to. The crowd held its breath. Even those with no musical training could feel the skill behind it. This was not someone guessing. This was someone who knew the instrument deeply, even if she had doubted herself moments before. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Not for the audience, but for herself. It was the first time in years she had felt fully present. The piano responded to her confidence, producing a sound that felt almost alive. The music flowed freely now, unbroken by hesitation. Time seemed to stretch. People who had planned to stay for only a moment found themselves rooted in place. The outside world faded. There was only the piano, the music, and the shared silence between notes. She reached the end of another passage and allowed a brief pause. Just long enough to breathe. Just long enough for the sound to settle. No one moved. Then she continued. The final section of this part carried a sense of quiet strength. Not dramatic, not showy. Just honest. The kind of sound that comes from someone who has lived, learned, and endured. As the last note rang out, it lingered longer than the others, filling the space with a soft echo. She lifted her hands slowly from the keys. The silence that followed was deep and complete. Not awkward. Not empty. Meaningful. In that silence, before anyone could react, it became clear that whatever happened next, this moment had already changed her. And it had changed everyone who had stopped long enough to listen. The silence did not break right away. It stretched longer than anyone expected, like the air itself was waiting. She kept her hands resting just above the keys, unsure whether to continue or stop. Her chest rose and fell slowly as she caught her breath. Then a single clap sounded. It was hesitant, almost unsure, but it was enough. Another followed. Then another. The sound grew, spreading through the crowd until applause filled the space. It wasn't loud at first. It built gradually, gaining strength as people stood straighter, finally allowing themselves to react. She flinched slightly at the noise. Her first instinct was to stand up and step away. Attention had never been her goal. She turned on the bench, confused, eyes wide, as if she were unsure the reaction was meant for her. The applause grew louder. Someone near the front nodded at her with quiet respect. Another smiled in a way that carried gratitude instead of amusement. She stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, not from fear, but from the sudden shift in energy. Just minutes ago, she had been the center of a joke. Now she stood at the center of something she did not know how to name. She gave a small, awkward bow, more out of habit than confidence. Her face warmed again, but this time it was different. This warmth did not come from embarrassment. It came from being seen. The person who had laughed earlier tried to clap too, though the sound felt out of place now. They avoided her eyes. Someone called out, "That was beautiful," without shouting, as if raising their voice might break the moment. She nodded once in response, unsure what to say. Words felt unnecessary. She reached down, picked up her bag, and stepped away from the piano. A path opened naturally through the crowd. People moved aside with care, as if she were carrying something fragile. As she walked, she noticed faces more clearly for the first time. Some were smiling softly. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked emotional, surprised by feelings they hadn't expected to feel that day. She paused near the edge of the space, planning to leave quietly. That was when someone spoke again. "Will you play more?" The question came from a calm voice, not demanding, not playful, just hopeful. She hesitated. Her first instinct was to say no. She had already done more than she intended. The moment felt complete, wrapped in silence and applause. Continuing felt risky. But before she could answer, she noticed something else. The piano was no longer just a prop. Felt like an invitation. She looked back at it. The bench, the keys, the space she had just filled with sound. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with curiosity. She turned slowly and walked back. The crowd parted again, this time with anticipation instead of surprise. People leaned forward slightly, careful not to speak. Phones were held steady, but no one pushed closer. She sat down once more. This time, her movements were calmer. Her shoulders relaxed naturally. She adjusted the bench, placed her bag beside her, and rested her hands lightly on the keys. She did not rush. The first note came out clear and steady, stronger than before. Carried intention. The sound traveled easily, finding its place in the room. This piece was different. It moved with more confidence, more depth. The melody unfolded patiently, allowing space between phrases. It felt thoughtful, as if she were speaking directly to the people listening. The crowd responded by growing still again. Applause had given way to attention. No one interrupted. No one whispered. As she played, she became more aware of the audience, but it did not distract her. Instead, it grounded her. She was not playing at them. She was playing with them. She remembered moments from her past when she had performed for small groups. How nervous she had felt then. How desperate she had been to impress. This was different. There was nothing to prove. Her fingers moved smoothly, confidently. The piano responded warmly, each note clear and full. The piece carried a sense of acceptance, as if it understood both who she had been and who she was now. A man near the back closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. A woman beside him rested her head against the wall, breathing slowly. The person who had suggested the prank earlier stood completely still. Their phone was now lowered, forgotten. The joke they had planned no longer mattered. Something better had replaced it. The performer felt a quiet joy rise inside her. Not excitement, not pride, just peace. She allowed herself to take her time, stretching the notes, letting them fade naturally. The piano filled the space without effort. For the first time in years, she did not feel divided between who she was and who she wanted to be. The two felt aligned. As the piece reached its final section, the sound softened. Her touch became lighter, more delicate. The music seemed to slow the world around it. The final note settled gently into silence. This time, the pause was shorter. Applause returned, stronger than before. It echoed off the walls, warm and sincere. Some people clapped while smiling to themselves. Others nodded quietly, as if acknowledging something personal. She stood again, more confidently this time. She bowed once more, a little deeper. She met a few eyes in the crowd and smiled softly. The smile felt real, not forced. She stepped away from the piano and did not rush to leave. She stayed near the edge of the crowd, letting the moment finish naturally. Someone approached her and said thank you, simply and honestly. Another nodded without speaking. No one asked questions. No one demanded explanations. She appreciated that. The moment began to loosen, returning slowly to normal. Conversations resumed in low tones. People checked their phones again, though more thoughtfully than before. She took a deep breath. The prank was long gone. In its place was something quieter and stronger. As she finally turned to leave, she glanced back at the piano one last time. It no longer felt like a challenge. Felt like a door reopening. She stepped outside into the open air, the sound of the piano still echoing softly in her ears. The noise of the place faded behind her as doors closed, replaced by distant traffic and the quiet movement of people passing by. For a moment, she stood still, letting everything settle. Her hands felt warm, slightly tired. She flexed her fingers slowly, almost surprised by how natural the movement felt. It had been so long since she had played like that, without rules, without expectations. She took a deep breath. What had just happened did not feel real yet. It felt like something borrowed, something that might slip away if she thought about it too much. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and began to walk. As she moved down the street, her phone vibrated. She ignored it at first, then felt it again. And again. She stopped and looked. There were messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Short notes, question marks, a few simple words asking if that had really been her. She frowned slightly, confused. Then she saw a video. Someone had posted the performance. Not just a few seconds, but long enough to show the shift. The awkward beginning, the growing silence, the applause. It was already spreading, shared by people who didn't know her name but felt something in the moment. She watched only a few seconds before locking her phone. Her heart beat faster, not with excitement, but with something closer to disbelief. She had not planned this. She had not asked for attention. The idea that so many people were now watching felt heavy. She kept walking. That evening, she sat alone in her small, quiet space. The kind of place built for rest, not performance. She placed her bag down and leaned against the wall, eyes closed. The memories returned, clearer now. She remembered the first time she had touched a piano as a child. How strange the keys had felt. How proud she had been when a simple melody finally made sense. She remembered hours of practice, frustration, joy, and the comfort music had given her when words failed. She also remembered why she had stopped. Life had asked for different things. Time, energy, care. The piano slowly became something she loved from a distance. She told herself it was fine, that people grow out of dreams. But that afternoon proved something else. She had not grown out of it. She had grown around it. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered one message, then another. Some were kind. Some were curious. A few asked if she would play again somewhere public. She did not respond to those. Not yet. She needed time to understand what the moment meant for her, not for anyone else. The next day, the video continued to spread. People commented on her calm, her honesty, the way the prank had turned into something meaningful. Many shared their own stories of talents they had set aside. Dreams paused rather than ended. She read a few comments, then stopped. She did not want the noise to drown out what she felt inside. Later that week, she passed a small music shop. The kind with old instruments in the window and a quiet atmosphere inside. She slowed, then stopped. For a long moment, she simply stood there. Then she went in. The smell of wood and polish filled the air. She ran her fingers gently along the edge of a piano, not to play, just to feel it. The shop owner looked up, nodded politely, and said nothing. She sat down. This time there was no crowd, no cameras, no expectations. She played softly. The notes were familiar, comforting. They filled the small space easily without effort. She smiled. A small smile meant only for herself. She understood something then. That day in public had not changed who she was. It had reminded her. She did not suddenly become someone new. She simply allowed an old part of herself to breathe again. In the weeks that followed, life returned to its normal rhythm. She still worked, still handled responsibilities, still lived quietly, but something was different. She made time, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late at night. She played at home, at the shop, occasionally in small, welcoming spaces where people listened without judgment. She did not chase attention. She did not try to recreate the moment. She let music be what it had always been. A language. The prank that started it all faded into the background. People stopped mentioning it. The internet moved on to the next story. She did not mind. What mattered stayed with her. One afternoon, as she walked past the same place where it had all happened, she slowed again. The piano was still there. Someone else was playing now, hesitantly, unsure of themselves. She stopped to listen. When the player finished, there was light applause. The person stood up quickly, embarrassed. She smiled and clapped a little longer. Their eyes met for a brief second, and something passed between them. Understanding, encouragement, permission. She continued on her way. The moment had come full circle. She had been underestimated once, reduced to a joke. But instead of shrinking, she had chosen to speak in the language she knew best. Not to prove a point, not to impress, but to be honest. And in doing so, she reminded others, and herself, that what lies quiet inside a person is often deeper than anyone expects. Some talents rest, some dreams wait, and sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected moment for them to rise again, stronger and truer than before.